Hey, I'm Steve Spencer from SMB Capital. Today I want to talk to you about a trade from earnings season. The stock ticker is HZNP, specialty pharma. They actually sell generic drugs. Since it put in its high in August, its low from August down to this fall was about 70% off of its high. Pretty much got caught up in this wave of the Valiant sell-off, which really pulled down that entire sector with it. And so now that we're coming into earnings season, really what we're looking at is saying, hey, some of these names are beaten down. How do they react to the reports, especially if they report a good number and give good guidance? And that's what HZNP actually did. Reported a solid number, raised guidance, and so we want to look at making a possible trade here. Now, one thing I want to remind you of is it's a trade. The reported numbers, we're going to look at the catalyst, we're going to look at the longer term chart to kind of see how are people positioned coming into earnings, and then maybe think about what the psychology is going to be like for some of the people who are involved in the name. And when we combine those things with the intraday price action and what we're seeing on the tape, we can make a trade, an intraday trade, possibly with a good risk to reward. This is very different than an investment. It's not as if I have an analyst, giving me their breakdown of the entire earnings report and saying, this is how they're doing in each drug. This is, what they're doing in terms of cash flow, EPS. This is how we're going. This is what we're modeling out over the next few quarters, the next 2 years, and putting on a longer term position based on that. This is just a trade. It's something entirely different, and you should keep that in mind. So coming into earnings, we had this stock, as I mentioned, it had come off quite a bit. It put in its low in October, about 70% from the summer high. And since that point, it had moved higher into the mid-teens. Coming into earnings had been accumulated a few dollars off of its low. So the number comes out and it's good. They raise guidance. It looks like it's going to gap higher. And so what I'm thinking about is, hey, the stock basically, after topped out in the mid-30s over the summer, it gapped down into the mid-20s and just got crushed over a 3-day period where it put in a bottom at $16. And then it had another down leg where it put in its ultimate bottom, closer to around $13. And when the numbers are good and it comes out today, I say to myself, where is it going to gap? Is it gapping above the most recent accumulation? Or is the second group of people, or excuse me, is the group of people who bought it after it bottomed in early October at 16, are those people going to be in the money? Is the stock going to be high enough so that they're in the money? And if the last two groups of people who are buying it are going to be in the money, they're not going to have such a huge incentive to sell today. They're going to be like, hey, the numbers were good. We're back in the money now. Maybe we can actually add to these positions. So that's the psychology element. The other part of the psychology that I talked about in the morning meeting and you need to think about is some people who just got burnt might say, hey, the stock is gapping up. It's 50, 60% off the low. Let's use this as an opportunity to sell. And so you have these different groups of people vying. And what we want to do is we want to look at, identify important levels in the stock and say, are there people selling at those levels? Are they buying at those levels? And as it starts to, whether the buyers are control or the sellers are control, have our position. Now I came in, we talked about it in the morning meeting, we identified 1950 before the market opened as that was kind of a level. If it was holding above that level, we considered the buyers in control. The stock had run up to $21 to $22 a share. That was kind of the thought process coming in. When the market opened, the first thing that it did was it sold off. It came in, looked at the tape, established a position, and in reverse. But what I want to do is kind of walk you through some of the criteria that we look at as our process for making a trade like this right on the open. So the first thing is I'm actually going to watch the tape during the first 20 to 30 minutes. What that means is I'm watching the time and sales, I'm watching the offers and bids, and I'm trying to really identify if there are large sellers or buyers in the stock to give me a clue whether or not I can put on a position or add to a position, put on more risk. The next thing I want to do right on the open is if the stock is coming down into what I view as potential support areas, what does it do when it comes into that area? Does it blow right through the support area and there's no sign of any buyers, meaning, wow, this stock really could actually trend to the downside for the day? Or does it slow down in that area? Maybe it goes a little bit below it, comes back above it, stabilizes. So I think, hey, there are some people interested in buying this stock in this area. What do I need to see for a change in direction at that point. Another point is identifying sellers. If something comes down into a buy area and it starts to go up, and then there's a large seller that won't lift, well, I have a perfect catalyst to either establish a position or add to a position if that seller lifts. And then finally, if I'm in a position and it's going one way and there's momentum one way, what do I need to see to change momentum in the other direction so that I have confirmation in my trade idea and my thesis that it's actually starting to work, and I want to hold on to that position or add to that position if I could find a good spot to add. And so those are kind of the criteria I'm looking for a trade on right on the open. Okay, well, this is what actually happened. Market opened. There were some aggressive sellers right on the open. It pushed it down into 19, threw in a bid in front of 19, bought a little bit, went below $19, little by a little bit, maybe 20 cents or so, popped back up. What I saw on the tape was a seller at 19.02. Once I saw that seller, I said, okay, the stock stabilizes and actually that seller lifts. We have another catalyst for it to work its way higher. When it did actually drop 19 and dropped 18.80, I actually hit out of the position as the momentum was continuing below my support area, and I wanted to kind of see where is it going to stop. Well, it actually stopped right when I got hit out. It went down a few more cents. It stopped, got back above 80 cents, so I bought the stock back. Once I got the stock back, I had a defined risk, which was the low print of the day. I also had defined resistance, which was the 19.02 seller. I also had my 19.50, which we identified in the pre-market as if that stock gets above there, then I'm going to look for my intraday swing or my multi-day swing to go to my target areas. And so you can kind of see that reflected in that little bullet point. I grabbed that from our morning game plan. Those were the levels we identified for potential resistance, potential support. Below 19, you can see I had 18.60. And as I built in a position, once it stabilized above 18.80, I knew I could have a stop below the low end of the day, and I could also have a stop below the support area I had identified in the morning game plan. I also knew that if it got back above 19.50, first of all, if the seller lifted at 19.02, which we can kind of see here on the intraday chart, you can kind of see it went down those two big red candles right on the open. It came back up, and you see how it moved sideways in a very tight range. When that 19.02 seller lifted, boom, you can see it shot up. Where did it shoot up to? That blue line at the 19.50, which was our change in momentum, buyers taking control. So when you're in a position like I was here and I was long, what I want to see is I want confirmation of the trading thesis to play out. Does the seller lift at 19.02? Does it quickly shoot up and show momentum to the upside? Does it actually hold a little bit higher than 19, meaning it's going to have some momentum if it breaks above 19.50? And then once it breaks above 19.50, it's just a trend trade for me, and I'm going to be looking to take some sales into my target areas. The only really thing I did besides buying below that 19 and then adding above 19.02 was I waited for it to actually get above $20, show some strength above 20. I put in a bid in front of $20, so when it pulled back, I had some more shares there, and then I scaled out up into the 21.30 area on my trade. So that was it. Hopefully there was a good lesson here. This is a trade. We do it all the time in earnings season. Those were the factors we looked at, and hopefully you learned something.